I'd never been nervous meeting someone's parents until I met Islas. The walk from the valet to the entrance of Castellan felt like crossing a tightrope. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights beyond, their steady glow doing nothing to calm the storm in my chest. My suit jacket fit well. My tie was straight. I practiced my smile in the reflection of the glass door, willing warmth into my voice. Isla offered her hand and whispered, "You've got this." Her confidence should have steadied me, but as her father's car eased away, I realized it was her world I was about to enter, and I didn't even know the beginning of the rules. They led me to a private dining room reserved for high-stakes meetings and corporate negotiations. The mahogany table gleamed under soft pendant lights, glassware aligned like a row of sentinels. A waiter in a crisp tuxedo poured champagne into flutes that caught the light and refracted a promise of celebration, a promise I was already doubting. Across from me, Isla's parents sat as though sculpted from marble and silk. Roland Mercer's tailored suit fit like armor, his gaze measured, unflinching. Marianne, seated beside him, offered me a polite smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. I swallowed. My ring felt heavy in its box under my jacket pocket. We exchanged pleasantries, school, work, memories of how Isla and I met. Every answer felt rehearsed. I talked about my consulting firm's latest project, trying to sound successful enough but not threatening. Roland nodded once, curtly. He asked about my family, where they lived, what they did. I spoke about my parents' small business, how my sister taught kindergarten. I smiled as I spoke, recalling happy memories. But with every word, I sensed his amusement grow, like a wave gathering strength behind my back, ready to crash. The first course arrived, scallops nestled on a smear of cauliflower puree, delicate and white. I took one bite and forced another smile. The conversation shifted to future plans, children, house, traditions. I imagined talking about my dream home, a modest house I'd renovate for Isla. Instead, I feigned agreement and nibbled at artisan bread. The waiter topped up my glass. The champagne's sweetness turned sour on my tongue. Then came the joke. Roland leaned back, steepling his fingers. "So, Julian," he said, voice low and mocking, "what do you plan to do when the bank account runs dry? Or is that when you plan to bounce?" His words landed like stones, each syllable resonating across the table. He spoke as though he knew me better than I knew myself. My chest tightened. I glanced at Isla. She laughed. Not politely. Not that nervous chuckle I might have forgiven. It was a full-throated laugh that wrapped around his words and made them stick in my throat. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, as though I'd done something worthy of ridicule, as though I'd earned my place as the butt of a joke. My ring finger tingled. I could almost feel the weight of expectation shifting from my hand to the table. I took a breath, looked at the ring on her hand, and felt my reflection shatter. Time slowed. I saw the silver band catch the light, felt the hollow bloom of betrayal in my chest. My mind raced through every moment of our engagement, the night I surprised her on the rooftop with fairy lights, the way she pressed her cheek to mine as the skyline kissed the horizon, the promise we whispered to each other under stars. All those moments multiplied in that second, collapsing into a single, undeniable truth. This life wasn't ours. It belonged to a family that would never see me as more than an accessory. I stood up. The room hushed. The waiters froze. My chair scraped the floor, and I felt every eye turn to me. I didn't know what I would say, but the ring left my finger before words formed. I placed it beside her wine glass, its crimson liquid rippling, as though startled by my movement. I felt the cool metal slide across the table's surface and come to rest, a fragile emblem of everything undone. I looked at Isla one last time. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering across her features. There was fear there, maybe pity. I wondered if she realized in that moment how deep the cut went. But she didn't move to stop me. She didn't reach out. She only watched as I turned away. I walked out. No scene, no shouting. Just the soft click of my shoes on the marble floor, each step sounding a finale to a dream I'd once believed in. The door closed behind me, sealing the laughter and the luxury and the lie. Outside, the cool night air wrapped me like a cloak, bracing me for a silence I'd never known could feel so loud. Standing under the street lamp, I closed my eyes and let the city hum around me. The future lay ahead, unwritten, uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something stronger than fear, relief. The joke had ended everything I thought I wanted. Now, I could discover what I truly needed. I didn't go back to our condo that night. Instead, I checked into the Grand Meridian Hotel under a false name, carrying only a duffel bag and the hollow weight of betrayal. The lobby clock read midnight when I handed over my credit card, the clerk's practiced smile failing to reach his eyes as he asked for an ID I didn't have. Upstairs, I unlocked the door to room 712 and flicked on the overhead light, the brightness stabbing at my temples. I dropped my bag by the bed, kicked off my shoes, and sank into the plush mattress, staring at the ceiling as the shadows of the chandelier's crystal prisms danced above me like mocking specters. Sleep drifted in fragments. I dreamed of laughter, hollow, echoing laughter that grew louder with each replay. I saw Isla's face twisting into amusement at my expense, her eyes bright with derision. I felt my chest tighten as I tried to speak, but the joke was always on me, my voice swallowed by a tide of champagne and contempt. I woke gasping, cold sweat plastering my hair to my forehead. When I reached for my phone, the screen was streaked with fingerprints and dozens of missed notifications. Messages piled up in a digital avalanche, Isla asking if I was okay, her mother imploring me to forgive, friends feigning concern, each text an echo of the same question: what happened? They hadn't heard her father call me a gold digger or witnessed the ease with which she sold me out. They only saw the aftermath, the void I'd left in my place. I stared at her name blinking at the top of the screen and considered deleting everything. But I didn't. Instead, I switched the phone to Do Not Disturb, silence the world. Morning came too soon. I sat on the edge of the unmade bed, running my hands through my hair, willing the events of last night into unreality. A pot of lukewarm coffee sat on the bedside table. I took a shallow sip and grimaced. My stomach churned. I pulled the curtain aside and watched city traffic crawl below, cars inching forward like people moving through life. I felt like one of those cars, boxed in, waiting for permission to move. Eventually, I relented and propelled myself out of bed. I showered, letting hot water sluice away the residual sting of rejection, and dressed in fresh clothes I'd thrown together at the last minute. I paused before leaving, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my cheeks hollow. I looked like a man who'd lost more than a relationship. I looked like someone who had lost himself. The elevator ride down was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. On the street, I hailed a cab without looking back. I gave the driver the address of my favorite coffee shop, a no-frills place that felt like home. When I sat down at a window table, I ordered a double espresso and an everything bagel. The barista set my cup in front of me with a sympathetic smile. I nodded in gratitude, fingers tracing patterns on the ceramic before lifting it to my lips. The bitterness grounded me. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Theo, my best friend since college, the one person who'd seen me at my highest and my lowest without flinching. I let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Martina Elwell, the CEO I'd been consulting for. Are we still on for this afternoon? No mention of anything else. That familiarity offered a bittersweet comfort. Work was the one place where I still had control. I glanced at my reflection in the window as I sipped my coffee, watching life pulse by on the sidewalk. A mother steadied her toddler, a businessman argued into his phone, a street musician coaxed mournful notes from a saxophone. The world continued as though nothing had happened, indifferent to the rupture in my life. I wished I could slip into that anonymity, become another face in the crowd, forget who I was supposed to be. But I couldn't, because I knew something that these strangers didn't. Their laughter didn't matter. Their judgments, their opinions, they held no power over me unless I gave it away. And in that moment, as the steam curled from my cup and the city roared outside, I decided I wouldn't. I retrieved my phone, scrolling through the voicemails and messages. Theo's frantic voice poured through the speaker. Julian, man, where are you? I've been calling you all night. Isla texted me, said you left. Look, if I was you, I'd call her back. I mean, she's your fiancée. His tone was tentative, afraid to push too hard. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I chewed on my lower lip and typed a simple reply. Call me later. One by one, I cleared the rest. Martina confirming our meeting, old college buddies checking in, even a notification from my bank about an overdraft alert. I deleted half the emails in my inbox until I could breathe. Then I slid my phone into my pocket and stood. The world outside the cafe felt enormous, brimming with opportunities I'd never noticed before. I realized that for the first time in months, maybe years, I was standing on my own. Later that afternoon, I met Martina in her office. She looked up from her desk, concern flickering in her eyes as I shook her hand. Everything okay? She asked. I gave a curt nod. Fine. I sat down and outlined the next steps for our project, focusing on product launch timelines and revenue forecasts. She watched me with an unreadable expression, then nodded and took notes. Work was familiar: calculators, spreadsheets, strategy. It didn't require me to be someone's prop or punching bag. It required competence, vision, and integrity. After the meeting, I walked back to the cafe, bought another espresso, and sent Theo a text: "Meet me at the old park bench in an hour." He replied almost instantly: "On my way." I sat outside, shoulders squared, breathing in the spring air. When Theo arrived, he flopped onto the bench next to me, eyes wide with questions. I handed him my coffee and said, "I'm okay, man. Not great, but okay." He nodded, studying me like a wounded comrade. "You want to talk about it?" I stared at my cup, the late afternoon sun glinting off its rim. "I'm not going back," I said. "Not to her. Not to that life." It felt like a funeral, Theo. Like I was mourning the death of something I thought was love. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Then don't." I looked up at him and managed a small, genuine smile. "No, I won't." As we sat there, the world carried on around us, cars honking, children laughing, life unfolding in riotous color. And I realized that while some endings felt like funerals, they were also beginnings. The echo after the door closed wasn't a dirge, it was an invitation. An invitation to step into a story of my own making. I took a sip of coffee, let its warmth spread through me, and stood, ready to answer the call. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in soft, forgiving slats, but I felt no warmth. Coffee sat cooling on the kitchen counter, its steam dissipating like my last hopes of reconciliation. I'd barely touched it when I heard a soft knock at the door, 3 deliberate taps that echoed too familiarly. My heart lurched, and I stood frozen, the mug clutched in my hand. Isla. After everything, she was here. I set the cup down with more force than intended and moved toward the door, each step heavy as if I were wading through water. Through the peephole, I saw her standing on the stoop, eyes rimmed red, hair slightly mussed around her face. She held a crumpled bouquet of daisies. Her favorite, wrapped in tissue paper. It was morning, but she'd come straight from home, not stopping to change or compose herself. My throat tightened. Part of me wanted to slam the door and leave her standing there. Part of me dreaded to see her pain. I opened the door without greeting. The hallway light spilled between us. She looked past me as though seeing something I could not, some memory I'd buried beneath anger. The daisies trembled in her hand. Her lips quivered. "Julian," she began. Her voice wavered like a song missing its chorus, familiar, but unsteady. "I'm so sorry." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying her. Her apology had the ring of rehearsed remorse. I'd heard it before during arguments that ended with a phone call and a promise to change. But this was different. I wasn't the same man who cared enough to listen. "Sorry isn't going to fix what happened," I said, voice low. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she lifted her chin. "Last night. I shouldn't have laughed. You're right. My father's words were cruel. You don't deserve that." I was scared of him, scared of what he'd say if I defended you. I froze. Her confession hung between us. I placed a hand over my heart, feeling its rapid thump. "You froze," I repeated. "You froze and chose silence." Silence that stung louder than any insult. She nodded, shoulders trembling. "I know. I wish I could take it back. I tried the second you walked out. I cried to my mom. I begged her to find you and tell you how much I love you." Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard. But she wouldn't help. I shifted, the wood of the doorframe digging into my back. "Your mother." I echoed. "She sided with him?" Isla bit her lip. She said he was too proud to admit fault. That I needed to find the right moment. That it would pass. Her hand tightened around the daisies, petals crumpling. I waited. I thought if I waited long enough, you'd come back. If I could fix it myself, without pushing him too hard. Without pushing him, I finished, astonished at the logic. "You mean without risking his approval?" Her eyes burned with regret. "I never thought he'd hurt you like that. I believed I could contain him." I closed my eyes. I remembered her gentle laughter on other occasions, moments when she bent to kiss my forehead, when she traced the outlines of my dreams on napkins at pizza joints. I remembered believing in her, in us. But now I felt that world crack into splinters. Is that all I was? Something to contain, to manage, to negotiate. My voice shook despite my efforts to keep it steady. She shook her head vigorously. "No, you were always more than that." She took a shaky step forward. "You're everything I ever wanted." But in that moment, I was someone else, someone afraid of losing my family. I stared at her, weighing her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to reach out and pull her in, to tell her I still loved her. Another part of me recoiled, sure that this was the moment she'd ask me to forgive and forget, to promise I'd dance to her father's tune forever. She swallowed and exhaled, steeling herself. Julian, I came here to say that I'm done negotiating. I won't put you through that again. If you want me, it'll be on my terms. I'm choosing you. Her declaration hung in the morning air, fragile as dew. I wanted to lean in and brush her hair behind her ear. I wanted to tell her this was exactly the moment I'd been waiting for, proof that she valued me enough to risk it all. Instead, I felt the weight of every moment since that dinner settle in my chest. I appreciate that, I said slowly, but I need time. I need to know you'll stand up for me, even when I can't. She paused, uncertainty flickering across her face. I will, she whispered. I stepped back, closing the door until it clicked. The daisies drooped against the wood. I could hear her footsteps retreat, a soft shuffle that carried more sorrow than I could bear. I rested my hand on the door for a moment, listening to her voice trail off down the hall like an echo I couldn't catch. Inside my apartment, the morning light felt cold and empty. I walked to the window and watched her disappear around the corner, the daisy's petals fading from view as though she'd never held them. My reflection shimmered on the glass. A man torn between love and self-respect, between the comfort of what once was and the uncertainty of what could be. I returned to the kitchen counter, where my coffee had gone cold hours ago. I picked up the cup and drained the last bitter drop. The taste lingered, reminding me that healing wasn't a choice. It was a process, slow, gradual, and undeniably my own. As the day wore on, I felt the momentum shift. My heart ached, but beneath the ache was a flicker of something new, agency. I wasn't merely reacting. I was choosing. I could let her back in, but on different terms, terms that respected my dignity. Or I could walk away, leaving behind the fragments of a future that had been shattered by laughter. The answer wasn't yet clear, but for the first time, I felt the weight lift just enough to see both paths. I closed my eyes and focused on the hum of the city below, letting it remind me that life moved forward, whether I followed or not. And in that sound, I heard the promise of possibilities waiting just beyond the door. 3 days after the conversation at my door, and 2 days after I'd sent those memories boxes off to storage, I settled into my home office's ergonomic chair, the afternoon sun slanting across my desk. I'd been easing back into routine, emails, client calls, strategy sessions framed by whiteboards scribbled with timelines and key performance indicators. Work felt safe, predictable, until my phone buzzed with a message that made my heart freeze. It was from Martina Elwell, the CEO of Vantage Technologies. I tapped open the notification and read, "Can we talk? Urgent." A knot tightened in my stomach as I clicked to call. The line rang twice before her voice, usually bright with enthusiasm, sounded low and measured. "Julian," she began, hesitating. "I just got off the phone with a Mr. Draper from Mercer and Company. He said he's reviewing my records to verify your personal financials, specifically your investment history and liquidity." Her tone was flat, as though delivering news of a mild plumbing emergency rather than an assault on my reputation. "What?" I forced surprise into my voice, though I'd known this was coming. My mind flashed back to Roland's predatory smirk at that dinner table, the way he'd tested my confidence in front of his daughter's fiancé. "He actually called you?" "Twice," Martina confirmed, exhaling with irritation. "He claimed it's standard due diligence before I hire any consultant with access to our funding rounds. But something felt off. He wanted bank statements, copies of my proof of funds letters, even my personal credit score report." I pressed my fingertips to my temples, feeling blood pulse there. Roland Mercer's firm, the very institution that spat me out as a joke, was weaponizing corporate protocols to undermine me. "Thank you for telling me," I said, standing to pace the length of the room. My suit jacket hung neatly on a hook. I hadn't bothered to put it back on. I ran a hand through my hair and tried to steady my voice. "I agree," she replied, her quiet confidence a bomb. "But I need you to walk me through this. Help me articulate to my board why these checks are unnecessary and why I trust you." I swallowed the urge to unload my frustration, to rail against Roland's duplicity. Instead, I nodded to myself, imagining she could see the gesture through the phone. "I'll send you a succinct statement outlining my credentials and the reason these inquiries are irrelevant. And I'll forward any relevant documentation preemptively, bank statements, proof of funds, the whole portfolio summary. That should cut off their leverage. Thank you, Martina said. I appreciate your help. I'll copy you on any further requests. She hung up, leaving me staring at the blank video call tile on my screen. A slow anger bubbled up, anger at Roland for orchestrating this, at Isla for sending me a token of love while her father moved in the shadows. It wasn't just an attempt to humiliate me socially. Now he aimed to strip away my professional standing. I opened a new document titled Statement of Financial Integrity and began typing. I outlined my consulting fees, bank references, audited financial statements, even a notarized letter from my accountant. I cross-referenced each figure, ensuring every I was dotted and every T crossed. This was more than damage control. It was armor, proof that I belonged in boardrooms, not just at dinner tables. By early evening, I'd sent the package to Martina, along with a brief note. I'm sorry you had to involve yourself in this, but I appreciate your willingness to stand by me. Let me know if there's anything else you need. Clicking send felt like firing a shot across Mercer and Company's bow. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders in waves. That night, I didn't call Isla. I felt too exhausted by the fight. Instead, I poured a glass of neat bourbon and settled on the balcony, the city's skyline a patchwork of lights and darkened windows. The air carried a crisp breeze, rustling the leaves of a potted ficus I hadn't remembered to water recently. I sipped and stared out, tasting oak and smoke, thinking of the silence between us, the silence that cut deeper than her father's insults. The next morning, a letter arrived at my front door. The heavy envelope bore Isla's handwriting, elegant and precise. I paused before opening it, sensing a trap. When I finally broke the seal, inside were 5 photographs from our trip to Tuscany, vineyards at sunset, a bronze statue in a hilltop piazza, 2 smiling faces clinking glasses of Chianti. Beneath the photos was a sheet of stationery in her handwriting, a long paragraph apologizing, pleading, promising that we can still make it work if you'll only meet me halfway. She wrote about our shared dreams. A house by the lake, Sunday morning breakfasts, one day, maybe children of our own. I held the letter at arm's length and felt something odd. No fluttering of affection, no pang of regret. Just a flat, cold certainty that I was reading an echo of the past, not an invitation to the future. I traced the edge of one photo. Us under a cypress tree, golden light haloing our heads. The memory warmed my chest for a moment before dissolving like the sugar rim of that gelato I'd dribbled down my wrist. I laid the photos on the dining table and watched them lie there, beautiful, static fragments of a story I'd closed. I realized that while Roland had attacked my finances, Isla's silence during that battle had been the deeper betrayal. She had known he might attempt something. She had known how harmful it could be, and yet she had done nothing until her own comfort beckoned her back. Her words in the letter rang hollow compared to the weight of her father's actions. I gathered the photographs and stationery into an envelope and wrote a single line on the front, returned, no longer applicable. I didn't stamp it. I left it on my desk, a quiet monument to a chapter one refused to continue. That afternoon, I called Martina. Julian, she greeted me, concern-laced with gratitude. They've received your documents and dropped the request. They said it was a clerical error. Good, I said, relief and vindication mingling in my chest. Thank you for standing up to them. She paused. I'm glad I did. But more importantly, I'm glad you did too. As I hung up, I felt a shift, a definitive hinge in the narrative of my life. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about refusing to be silenced or diminished, whether by a wealthy father's whims or the love that wouldn't defend me. The threat in a suit had been neutralized, but the greater threat, my own willingness to stay, had already been vanquished. I poured another glass of bourbon and raised it to the setting sun, to independence, to self-respect, and to the next chapter, written by my own hand, free from the laughter that once ended everything. The morning I agreed to meet Marianne Mercer, I felt the weight of 1,000 unsaid questions pressing down on me. Her request had come in an email, so brief it felt almost brusque. Can we talk? I have something for you. I stared at her name on the screen longer than I cared to admit, then drafted a polite reply suggesting a downtown cafe at 11. When the time arrived, I walked into Ellington and Company on Maple Avenue, not the upscale venue where I'd once hoped to celebrate my engagement, but a modest bistro whose linen tablecloths and mismatched chairs hinted at genuine warmth. She was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table beneath a painting of wildflowers. Marianne looked different up close. Her hair, once perfectly coiffed, fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Faint lines framed her eyes, not of age, but of years spent holding in truth she dared not speak. She rose as I approached and offered me a tentative smile, extending a hand I clasped gently. Her touch was cool, her knuckles slender and pale. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice softer than I remembered. We sat, and a waiter promptly appeared with menus, but Marianne waved him away. "I'm not hungry," she said, turning her gaze to the window. I nodded and waited for her to continue. She took a deep breath, as though bracing herself. "I'm sorry for what Roland said," she began, her eyes unfocused. "I'm sorry for what Isla did." Her words stumbled against the table's center, vulnerable and raw. I hadn't expected an apology from her, only from that formidable fortress of a man I'd once called my future father-in-law. "It wasn't just my father," she said, folding her hands in front of her. "It was all of us. We didn't see you. We saw our daughter, our legacy, and whatever we thought you represented. And none of us paused to consider how cruel that was to you." I studied her face, trying to find the Marianne I'd once known, the gentle laugh in her eyes, the way she'd compliment my cooking on our first holiday dinner, the brief warmth in her gaze when she believed I was the right match for her daughter. But beneath those memories lay a cavern of betrayal, silences, dismissals, and one devastating evening. I inhaled slowly. "Thank you," I said. It was the only answer I could muster without shattering. Marianne reached into her handbag and withdrew a small, velvet-lined box. My heart picked up pace as she placed it between us. I hesitated before opening it, as though part of me feared another trap. But inside lay a silver ring set with a dark sapphire, its stone gleaming like a secret under the cafe's soft lights. "This was mine before I married into this family," she said, her fingers brushing the box's edge. "Your grandmother gave it to me on my 21st birthday. I wore it for years as a reminder of who I was before becoming Roland Mercer's wife." I lifted the ring, admiring its simple elegance, the smooth band, the deep blue stone that caught the light in shifting ripples. "It's beautiful," I murmured, feeling its weight in my palm. Marianne smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I kept it hidden these last 30 years, afraid of what my in-laws would say if they knew. But after what happened at Castellan, I realized someone needed to give it new life, someone who understood self-worth." She paused, and I noticed how her shoulders drooped as though she had carried a burden too long. "Why me?" I asked, surprised by the lump in my throat. "Because," she said, her voice steady, "you refused to bargain away your dignity. You left that dinner rather than endure someone else's definition of your worth. I've spent my life conforming, an obedient daughter, a dutiful wife, an unseen mother. But you stood up for yourself." I felt a swell of emotion, gratitude, pain, hope, intertwined in a knot I couldn't untangle. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it," she urged, leaning forward. "Not as a gift from me, but as a symbol of your own value. Let it remind you that you don't owe anyone your dignity." I slipped the ring onto my finger, surprised by how perfectly it fit. The sapphire's cool surface rested against my skin, a silent pledge that I could choose my own path. I looked up at Marianne, awed by the quiet courage in her eyes. "Thank you," I repeated, meaning every syllable. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment before opening them again with a clarity I had never seen in her. "You're welcome. And Julian," she paused as though choosing her words carefully, "know that you deserve someone who values you without hesitation." I nodded, tasting the truth of her statement. For too long, I'd sought approval. First from my own doubts, then from a family that thrived on privilege. Now, with this ring, I claimed a new kind of approval, my own. We lingered at the table, talking quietly about my consulting work, or art projects, the small tragedies and triumphs that had filled her life. For the first time, I saw her not as Isla's mother or Roland's wife, but as Marianne, a woman who had reclaimed a piece of herself. The cafe's bustle faded around us until all I felt was the steady presence of her sincerity. When I left, the ring glinted on my hand like a beacon. Outside, the sun warmed my face as I walked down Maple Avenue. I paused, raising my hand to feel the sapphire catch the light. I thought of everything I had lost and everything I stood to gain. The weight of that ring reminded me that dignity was not negotiable, and self-worth was not a privilege to be bestowed. It was a right to be claimed. As Marianne's silhouette receded behind the cafe window, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. For the first time in months, I felt anchored, not to a promise made at a table beset by laughter, but to an unshakable conviction in my own worth. And with that certainty, I knew my story would continue on my terms, ring on finger, head held high. I stared at the stacks of cardboard boxes lining the living room, each one labeled in my neat handwriting: books, clothes, kitchen, memories. The condo felt cavernous now, its echo reminding me of every argument we'd ever had and every promise that had quietly unraveled. It had once been our sanctuary, but now each wall pressed in with the ghosts of conversations I no longer wanted to remember. I snapped a box closed and sealed it with tape, the rough strip catching on my fingertips as though reminding me of the cost of leaving. My hands trembled as I lifted the next box. Tuscany photos, our travel journals, the canvas print of the vineyard sunset we'd argued about hanging in the bedroom. I carried it to the foyer and stacked it neatly beside the front door. Each placement felt like a decision. This is where the past stays. Beyond this point lies a future I would build alone. The entire place smelled of cardboard and dust, like a library abandoned for too long. It felt good in a strange way, freeing, as though every packed item compressed the weight of old compromises. I paused in the hallway, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic below. My phone buzzed, a notification from Martina confirming her board meeting adjourned early after resolving that financial smear. I smiled at the small victory, then tucked the phone into my pocket and turned back to the boxes. There was no room for hesitation now. I moved methodically, pulling books from the shelves, sorting clothes in the closet, reclaiming the kitchen knives wrapped in bubble wrap. When I reached the bedroom, I found our bed stripped to the mattress, the headboard bare of the photographs we'd pinned there. I closed the curtains and gathered the sheets and pillows, bundling them into a sheet cover. The silk quilt we'd argued over, the one she said didn't match, went into the final box labeled linens. I took one last glance at the empty room and felt the hollow ache of loss, but also the thrill of opportunity. The buzzer rang. I hesitated, momentarily unsettled by the idea that someone might see me dismantling my life. Then I pressed the intercom. "It's me," I said. Theo's voice crackled through. "Need a hand?" I buzzed him in. A few minutes later, he appeared in the foyer, grin tentative and sympathetic. His presence was a tether to better days, a reminder that I hadn't done this alone. We hoisted boxes together, stacking them in his car with military precision. He cracked jokes to ease my tension. "Hey, don't label all your regrets miscellaneous," he teased, making me laugh despite myself. Even laughter felt unfamiliar now, but good. With each box loaded, the condo looked emptier, my reflection in the window growing smaller as the sun slipped lower in the sky. When the last box was secured in the trunk, I closed the door behind me and inhaled the thinner, freer air. Theo slung an arm around my shoulders. "You okay, man?" he asked. I brushed his hand away, smiling ruefully. "I will be." His nod was patient, understanding more than words could convey. I returned inside for a final sweep. The bare floors felt chilly under my shoes, the echoes louder than before. I walked through each room, touching the wall where our wedding photos had hung, stepping onto the floor we danced across on quiet Saturday mornings. I whispered a quiet farewell. To the life I once imagined, to the person I was when I thought that ring meant forever. At the front door, I paused and looked back one last time. The empty rooms held no threat now, only potential. I believed that once I ceased carrying these boxes of memory, I would feel lighter, ready to fill new spaces with different stories. I locked the door and slid the key under the mat, a gesture of finality and release. Theo was waiting by his car, engine idling, headlights off. I joined him in the passenger seat, the boxes of memories taking up most of the back. As we drove away, the condo vanished behind a curve, and I felt a profound quiet settle in my chest. It was the hush after closure, the pause before a new beginning. That night, I unpacked only one box in my temporary apartment, the one Marianne had given me. I set the silver sapphire ring on the nightstand, its dark stone catching the lamplight. I didn't need photographs or journals right now. I needed that reminder. That dignity is something you carry with you, not something you leave behind. I lay on the mattress of an unfamiliar bedroom, listening to the hum of the city through the open window. The boxes, tucked away in storage, had condensed my past into neat containers. In their place, I felt the space to breathe, to choose, to become someone not defined by others' laughter or approval. And as sleep claimed me at last, I realized that sometimes the most honest packings are not of belongings, but of truths, untold, unbroken, finally unbound. A week after Marianne's gift, I sat at my desk going through client proposals when an alert popped up on my laptop. A credit report inquiry I didn't recognize. The header read Mercer and CO in cold, capital letters. My stomach dropped. I clicked to view the details and saw multiple hard inquiries dated just 2 days ago, requests for my credit history, bank balances, even loan applications I'd never made. My pulse spiked. Roland had promised subtlety. This was outright sabotage. I closed my laptop, stood, and paced the length of my office. The sunlight streaming through the blinds felt too bright, too revealing. I needed proof. I dialed a mutual contact at First National Bank, a compliance officer I trusted. My voice was steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "Can you confirm whether Mercer and Company requested my statements?" I asked. There was a pause, then a polite sigh. "Yes, they did. We flagged it as unusual and denied the request pending your authorization." Relief and fury warred in my chest at once. They tried to slip under the radar, but banking regulations had caught them. I thanked my contact and hung up, marveling at the double edge of bureaucracy. It restrained me in my proposals but also protected me from predatory tactics. That evening, I confronted Isla over coffee at Blackwell's. Her eyes widened when I slid my phone across the table, showing the inquiries. She glanced at the screen, then back at me, cheeks paling. "Julian, I swear I didn't know." Her voice trembled like a candle flame. I folded my arms, leaned forward, and stared into her eyes. "You didn't know? Or you chose not to tell me?" My heart pounded. I needed honesty, not more excuses. She looked away, swallowing hard. I asked Dad for help fixing things after that dinner. He said he'd handle it professionally. I didn't ask for details. Her words felled me like a punch. I closed my eyes, recalling the night at Castellan, the way her laughter had sliced through me. Now I realized her father never stopped cutting. She'd enlisted him again, thinking he could erase pain with corporate maneuvers. The coffee between us cooled. I drank it in a single swallow and set the cup down hard. "You involved him again," I said. "You weaponized my name." My voice was low, controlled, but each word hammered the table. She reached across, but I pulled back. "I'm done being collateral damage." Her hand hovered over mine, trembling. "Please, Julian." "I'm trying." I shook my head. "Trying isn't enough. Not when you let him test me like this." Her lips quivered. "I love you." She whispered it, but the words felt empty beneath the din of Mercer and Company's inquiries. I stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. She gasped. "I have work to do," I said, the lie slipping out. I needed time to think, time to rebuild without betrayals lurking in the background. I walked away, leaving her alone under the soft glow of the cafe lights. That night, I called my accountant and scheduled a full audit of my personal and business accounts. I hired a credit monitoring service, activated fraud alerts, and changed several passwords. Each protective measure felt affirming, a brick in the wall I was erecting around my life. As I clicked through security settings, I realized how often I had trusted others, trusted love, family, social niceties, to safeguard me. Now, I was the only guardian of my own integrity. In the days that followed, I buried myself in work, throwing myself into client deliverables with a fierce focus. I rebounded data analysis late into the night, drafted marketing plans at dawn, and negotiated contracts with newfound confidence. My phone no longer buzzed with pleas from Isla or her family. The silence was disconcerting at first, but gradually it felt like breathing room. One afternoon, I received an email from Mercer and Company. Their clerical error notice was brief. They regretted any inconvenience and confirmed no further requests would be made. I read the lines twice, then closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The battle over my finances. I looked out the window at the cityscape, sunlight catching the glass facades of high-rises. I thought of all the times I'd compromised, tried to fit into molds not meant for me. The credit inquiries had been an affront, but they had also forced me to reclaim ownership of my story. I sipped my water and smiled, a slow, genuine curve. My name was on my credit report and on my terms. I was more than Mercer's weapon or Isla's project. I was Julian Mercer, no, Julian Morris, standing firm in my own worth. 2 months had passed, and in that time, I'd settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. My mornings began with coffee on the balcony, laptop open to project timelines and client updates. I'd taken to journaling again, filling pages with aspirations rather than anxieties. I'd even started attending a weekend pottery class, surprised at how soothing it was to knead clay into simple bowls, small creations I could hold, free from expectation. Life had regained its shape, defined by my choices rather than someone else's design. Then my phone buzzed, interrupting a Zoom call with Martina. I silenced the meeting, excusing myself to take the call privately. The display showed Isla's name. My chest tightened, a reflexive churn of anticipation and wariness. 2 months ago, I might have answered with hope. Now I answered with guarded calm. Hello. No sobs this time. No frantic apologies. Just soft breathing on the other end, measured and steady. Julian, she said. Her voice carried a confidence I hadn't heard before. No pleading tremor, no shaky preamble. I need to tell you something. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall, bracing myself. Go ahead. She inhaled. I've been seeing someone from the foundation, Matthew. He's working on the children's literacy project Dad sponsors. He's kind. He sees me. And maybe I was looking for someone to make me feel worthy without tests or jokes. Her tone was gentle, reflective, not designed to elicit pity. I wanted you to hear it from me. I pictured her office at the foundation, rows of filing cabinets and narrow desks where papers spilled over. I pictured Matthew, someone careful and considerate, someone she'd chosen. A wave of relief washed through me, followed by a quiet pride. She'd moved forward. She'd found support elsewhere. I'm glad you found someone who values you, I said, surprised at how easily the words came. You deserve that. She paused. For a moment, I feared she might apologize again, but she didn't. Instead, she continued, I called because I wanted to thank you. The words were so unexpected that I blinked. Thank you for walking away. I see now that you showed me what it means to honor yourself. I needed that lesson. I closed my eyes and let her gratitude sink in. It felt strange to be thanked for a departure that had felt so final. You're welcome, I said softly. I'm glad it helped. She chuckled, a low, warm sound. It did. And I hope you're happy. I glanced out the window at the dusty rose sky of early evening. I am, I replied. I had a home that felt like mine, a job I loved, friendships restored, and a ring from Marian that reminded me daily of my worth. I really am. Silence stretched across the line, comfortable now, like two old friends sharing a moment of quiet understanding. Finally, she spoke. I hope one day you find someone who sees your worth without a ledger. A smile tugged at my lips. I already have, I said, surprising both of us. I see it now. My heart hummed, steady and strong. I've learned to value myself first. Her breath caught. I'm proud of you, Julian. I felt a warmth expand through my chest that had nothing to do with nostalgia. Thank you, Isla. Goodbye. Goodbye, she echoed, softer this time. I ended the call and placed the phone on the table beside me. I let out a slow breath and closed my eyes, tasting the quiet triumph in the air. 2 months ago, her calm confidence would have been enough to upend me. Now, it felt like a benediction on a chapter already closed. I picked up my journal and wrote a single line. Closure is its own kind of gift. Then I turned the page and began sketching the outline of a new bowl I planned to shape in clay, a vessel meant to hold fresh water, not stale memories. That night, as dusk settled over the city, I stood on my balcony watching the lights awaken across the skyline. I slipped the silver sapphire ring, Marianne's gift, into my palm and traced its smooth band. It reminded me that the strongest bonds are the ones you forge with yourself, unbreakable because they spring from the truth of who you are. And in that gentle affirmation, I felt a softness bloom in my heart, a quiet celebration of endings that free you and beginnings born from resolve. The final conversation wasn't a farewell so much as a beginning, a promise that self-respect, once claimed, can lead you anywhere you choose. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unassuming and plain, resting on the welcome mat like any other piece of mail. I carried it inside, expecting a bill or a solicitation, but when I turned it over and saw Marianne's elegant script, my chest tightened. I hadn't spoken to her since that morning at the cafe where she awarded me the silver ring, and in the weeks since, her presence had become a quiet beacon in my life. I sliced the envelope open and unfolded a sheet of tissue-wrapped canvas. Beneath the soft paper lay a small painting of a weathered dock stretching into a pale, rippling lake at sunset, colors of molten gold melting into lavender sky, reeds swaying in a gentle breeze, and a single wooden rowboat tied loosely to a post. I lifted the painting and held it against the wall opposite my desk, just high enough that the fading light of dusk would catch the water's surface. The scene felt familiar and foreign at once, not Tuscany vineyards or candlelit dinners, but something quieter, steadier, and infinitely more hopeful. I ran my fingers over the brushstrokes, imagining Marianne's hand guiding the paint, perhaps recalling evenings she once spent dreaming of her own future before it was shaped by someone else's design. In that moment, I realized she'd sent me more than a gift. She'd sent me a reminder of possibility, of calm conviction. Later that evening, I found myself lingering in the living room, the painting glowing softly under the lamp's warm beam. The bottles of bourbon and glasses on the coffee table seemed louder, the edges of the room sharper, but the dock drifted before my eyes like a promise of stillness. I poured myself a measure and settled into the armchair facing the canvas, glass in hand. It was strange how a single image could carry so much weight, a silent manifesto that spoke of departure and return, of courage and trust in one's own bearings. I realized, too, that this revolution, my departure from a life that nearly broke me, was not an eruption of anger but a quiet shift, like water finding a new course. That night, sleep came easily, and I dreamed of standing at the edge of that dock, toes grazing the cool wood, the surface of the lake reflecting an endless sky. I felt neither fear nor loss, only readiness to step forward, as though balance had been restored. In the morning, I made coffee and stood before the painting again, imagining I could smell the lake's mist and hear distant loons calling across the water. I fetched an empty frame from the spare closet and fitted the canvas inside, then carried it to the wall above my kitchen table, a place where meals would be shared, ideas hashed out, phone calls with friends and clients made. Over the next few days, the painting became part of my routine. When work emails piled up or a difficult client negotiation left me frazzled, I'd glance away from the screen and find solace in the dock's quiet invitation. On weekends, I took the painting down and carried it to my pottery class, sketching the scene on a slab of clay before molding its form into a shallow bowl. My hands remembered the gentle sway of the reeds as they shaped the rim, and I thought of Marianne's words, "You don't owe anyone your dignity." Each coil of clay felt like an extension of that dock, a vessel built to hold only what I chose to put inside. One afternoon, the painting caught the light in a way that turned the lavender sky into deep violet. My sister called then, her voice bright and curious. "What's new with you?" she asked. I told her about the painting, about the pottery, about the feeling of waking each day unburdened. She laughed. Her laugh warm and genuine, as though she'd been waiting to hear that I'd found peace. I described how I'd hung the canvas above the kitchen table, how every meal now felt infused with purpose, how I'd started planning a weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin. "It's like you're rediscovering yourself," she said. I smiled, looking toward the painting, recognizing in that simple act of hanging a mirror for my soul. "I am," I said, and it's exactly the reminder I needed. That evening, I invited Theo over for dinner. I cooked pasta with fresh tomatoes, garlic, and basil, the kind of meal that filled the house with laughter and stories instead of tension. As we ate, the painting watched over us, its muted colors a steady presence. Theo raised his glass. To self-respect, he toasted, and I clinked my glass against his, feeling the echoes of my journey settle into steadier rhythms. Later, alone again in the soft lamplight, I traced the dock's edge with my gaze. What Marianne had given me was more than a painting. It was a living emblem of the quiet revolution I'd waged within myself. No grand proclamations, no dramatic battles, just the courage to step away, the grace to reclaim my worth, and the wisdom to hang a reminder in my home that sometimes the most profound transformations come in hushed strokes of color on canvas. And as I turned off the lights and the room softened into shadow, I knew I carried that dock within me, ready for any sunrise. 6 months had passed since I last walked away from the condo that had held promises I no longer believed in. In that time, I'd found a modest house on the edge of town, a fixer-upper with peeling paint and sagging floors, but with a view of the woods that felt like possibility. I'd spent weekends scraping wallpaper and repainting walls, measuring out tile for the kitchen backsplash, and coaxing life back into a garden that had languished under neglect. Everything I touched bore my fingerprints and my intention, from the freshly stained deck to the new light fixture in the hallway. Each improvement felt like a declaration. This house was mine, built on my terms. On a crisp autumn morning, I stepped onto that deck with a mug of black coffee in hand, the steam mingling with the cool air as I gazed at the golden light filtering through the treetops. I slipped the silver sapphire ring over my head and onto my finger, feeling the cool weight of the stones settle into place. Marianne's gift lay against my chest now, hidden beneath my shirt but never far from my thoughts. It reminded me that dignity wasn't something granted by others but claimed by myself. I ran a thumb over the dark stone and thought of all that had led me here, the laughter that ruptured my engagement, the financial attacks, the silences and apologies, and the small revolutions that had redefined my worth. Pulling my coat tighter around me, I imagined the day I'd leave this house to someone else, if that ever happened, and wondered if they'd feel the echo of my determination in the walls. But for now, it belonged to me, and I intended to live into that ownership fully. I stepped back inside, the wooden plank floor groaning beneath my boots, and made my way to the window overlooking the living room. There, above the mantel, I'd placed Marianne's painting of the dock at sunset, a testament to quiet resilience. Beneath it sat a flask of bourbon, a stack of books on business strategy and personal growth, and a small potted fern I'd named Grace. The room felt both lived in and hopeful, balanced between function and comfort. That afternoon, I found myself downtown running errands for the renovation, picking up oak planks for the new staircase railing, choosing weather-resistant exterior stain, and selecting a muted green for the front door. At each stop, shopkeepers greeted me by name, asking how the project was coming along. I felt the pleasure of community support, a contrast to the evening at Castellan where I'd felt so acutely alone. As I loaded the last of the supplies into my truck, my phone buzzed with a message, "Housewarming next month?" From Martina. I smiled, typing back, "Count me in." Moments later, a text from Theo, "Bring that bourbon." I grinned at the perfect coordination of friends and celebrated independence. Back at the house, I emptied the truck into the garage and carried boxes of tools inside. I paused at the threshold of the master bedroom, now painted a pale charcoal that caught the light in subtle whispers. I'd laid down new hardwood floors here last week, their surfaces gleaming under the ceiling fan's display of movement. I walked to the center of the room and turned in slow circles, imagining a bed where only one person slept, a desk where I'd write future proposals and stories, and a corner where I'd set up a small record player to fill the space with music I chose. I inhaled the scent of fresh paint and pine, feeling grounded in the reality of my own creation. In the evening, I sat at the dining table, an old farmhouse piece I'd refinished myself, with blueprints spread before me. The table's turned legs and rustic surface complemented the sapphire ring, its blue depth a steady point of focus as I sketched out the layout for built-in bookshelves. With each pencil stroke, I felt the convergence of vision and action. This was no longer merely about moving on. It was about constructing a life that reflected every lesson I'd earned: self-respect, resilience, and authenticity. Later, when the house was quiet, I settled into the armchair in the living room, the dock painting glowing softly in the lamp's light. I uncapped my bourbon flask and poured a measure into a glass, the amber liquid sloshing gently as I turned it in my hand. I let the warmth spread through me as I took a slow sip, savoring the burn and the comfort of solitude well-earned. I closed my eyes and heard the echo of the waves on that painted dock, a sound that no longer frightened me but invited reflection. Across the room, an unopened letter lay on the coffee table, its envelope bearing Isla's handwriting. I glanced at it and felt no compulsion to open it. I recognized it for what it was, another attempt to re-enter a story I had already rewritten. I rose and retrieved the envelope, then placed it in the recycling bin by the fireplace. There it would belong, among the cast-offs of a past version of myself. On the mantel, next to the painting, I had placed a new object. An antique compass I'd found at a roadside flea market. Its brass casing was scratched, its glass face slightly cloudy, but the needle still quivered northward with unwavering certainty. I had thought it simply a symbol of direction, but now I saw it as a testament to staying true to oneself. I picked it up and held it against Marianne's painting, aligning the compass's arrow with the dock's perspective, as though both pointed toward the same horizon of self-determination. That night, sleep found me easily in the renovated master bedroom. I fell into dreams without the rush of panic or doubt, instead spinning stories of distant travels and new beginnings. I remembered how lost I once felt, adrift in a sea of expectations, tethered by others' definitions of value. Now, I felt anchored in my own identity, guided by the ring's sapphire glow and the compass's unwavering needle. When morning arrived, light filtered through the new curtains I'd installed, dust motes dancing in the beams. I remembered a conversation with Martina about fear of complacency. "Don't mistake comfort for stagnation," she'd said. "Growth happens when you know who you are and still choose to become more." I took a deep breath and stood, ringing the crystal tumbler on the nightstand to awaken my senses. I slipped the compass into my jacket pocket and the ring settled on my finger like a promise. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, where Grace the fern thrived on the windowsill, and poured a fresh cup of coffee. I thought of the housewarming party next month, of friends filling this space with laughter and conversation, each person a testament to the life I'd cultivated. I thought of Marianne's kindness, of Theo's steadfast loyalty, of Martina's partnership, and of the person I'd become, a man who understood that the greatest value one could hold was not inheritance or lineage, but the integrity of one's own heart. Raising the mug to my lips, I whispered to the empty room, "Here's to self-worth," unapologetically claimed. And in that moment, bathed in morning light and quiet resolve, I realized I had indeed found someone who saw my worth without a ledger, myself. I never expected to be treated like royalty at my wife's sister's wedding, but I also never expected to be treated like a ghost. Weddings are supposed to be about love, family, and celebration. That's what I thought as I adjusted my tie in the mirror of the hotel room, getting ready for what was supposed to be a joyous occasion. I wasn't just another guest at this wedding, I was family. I had been married to Rose for 5 years. 5 years of showing up for every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering where I smiled, nodded, and played the role of the good husband. 5 years of making small talk with her father, who never quite knew what to say to me, and her mother, who always managed to find a way to make me feel like I was standing on the outside looking in. But today was different. Today was supposed to be a celebration where I was, without a doubt, part of the family. That's what I told myself as I walked into the grand ballroom, my shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. The venue was extravagant, the kind of place that screamed, "No expense spared." Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, and long white drapes framed the tall windows overlooking a breathtaking garden. Every table was dressed in fine linen, decorated with fresh flowers, and set with polished silverware. I made my way toward the seating chart, expecting to see my name listed next to Rose's at the family table. That was the logical place for me, wasn't it? Right there beside my wife, celebrating her sister's big day. I scanned the elegant calligraphy on the chart, my eyes flicking across each neatly printed name, moving faster when I couldn't find mine. Maybe there was a mistake. I checked again, and again. My name wasn't there. A strange sensation prickled at the back of my neck, a slow-growing unease. I frowned, glancing around. One of the wedding planners stood nearby, adjusting the placement of a centerpiece. She was young, probably a college student hired to help out for the night, and when she saw me staring at the seating chart, she gave me an apologetic smile. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice light. "I think my name might have been left off the list. I'm the groom's brother-in-law, Rose's husband." I expected her to double-check, maybe reassure me that it was a simple mistake. Instead, she hesitated, her smile turning awkward. "Oh, right." I didn't like that reaction. She looked at her clipboard, flipping through pages before finally nodding. "You're at table 24. Table 24. That sounded fine, until I noticed something strange. The numbering of the tables inside the grand ballroom stopped at table 23. I blinked. "Where exactly is table 24? She hesitated again. Then she motioned toward the entrance of the ballroom, the exact opposite direction of where I expected to be. I followed her gesture, my gaze landing on a small, isolated table placed right outside the main reception area. A table tucked away in a corner near the coat rack, far from the beautifully decorated hall where everyone else would be dining, laughing, and toasting. For a second, I thought I was seeing things. My stomach tightened. "That's my table?" The planner winced. "I just follow the chart." A sharp laugh escaped me, disbelief washing over me in waves. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of mix-up. There was no way my wife, my own wife, had placed me outside the reception like I was an afterthought. I turned toward the crowd, my eyes searching until I found her. Rose, my beautiful, polished, charming wife, standing near the wedding party, laughing at something her sister had said. She looked radiant in her fitted dress, her hair styled to perfection, her posture effortlessly graceful. She was basking in the glow of the event, surrounded by people who adored her. And then she saw me. She met my gaze, her lips twitching into a smirk. I started walking toward her, weaving through the guests, my mind still trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe. She spoke before I could. "Only close family gets a table," she said, her voice laced with amusement, like she was telling me an inside joke. It took me a moment to process her words. Only close family. I stared at her, waiting for some indication that she was joking, that she would roll her eyes and say, "Relax, I'm kidding." But she didn't. She just stood there, watching me, waiting for my reaction. And suddenly, it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. Rose had done this on purpose. I exhaled slowly, a tightness building in my chest. My fingers curled into my palm, not in anger, but in something colder, something heavier. I turned back to the lonely table by the coat rack. A table meant for people who didn't belong. That was where my wife had placed me, away from the celebration, away from her. And for the first time, I realized something I had ignored for too long. Maybe Rose never truly saw me as family. Maybe I had spent 5 years believing I was part of something that never really included me. Maybe I had been blind. And now, standing there in that beautifully decorated ballroom, surrounded by laughter and celebration, I felt something unexpected. I felt done. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. Before I could even process my wife's words, before I could fully absorb the cold, sharp reality of what had just happened, I felt a presence beside me. A presence I had come to recognize over the years. My mother-in-law, Janet. She had the same smirk as Rose. That same thin-lipped expression of quiet amusement. Her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a champagne flute as she surveyed me like I was an oddity, something out of place. "Guess you don't count," she said, her voice light and airy, as if she were commenting on the weather instead of casually reducing me to a nonentity. Then, she giggled. It was a soft, delighted sound, but to me, it felt like nails dragging across a chalkboard. I turned to look at her fully. She was dressed in a deep emerald gown, her jewelry gleaming under the chandelier light, her hair styled to perfection. She looked every bit the wealthy, elegant matriarch that she so desperately wanted to be perceived as. And yet, standing there, smirking at me as if I were some kind of amusing inconvenience, all I could see was the woman who had never truly accepted me. Over the years, Janet had made it clear in 1,000 subtle ways that I wasn't her kind of person. I wasn't from an elite family. I didn't come from money. I wasn't someone she could brag about at her social clubs. And now, she had found a new way to remind me of that fact. I glanced at Rose, waiting for her to say something, anything, to contradict her mother. But she just stood there, sipping her champagne, watching the exchange like it was an entertaining scene from a movie. She was enjoying this. They had planned this together. I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose as the realization settled deep in my gut. I had always known that Janet didn't care for me, but I had fooled myself into believing that Rose was different. That no matter how much tension existed between me and her mother, at the very least, Rose would stand by me. But here she was, laughing at my humiliation. Something inside me hardened. "Wow," I said, keeping my voice low and measured. "You really went all out with this, huh?" Janet lifted her brow. "I have no idea what you mean." I let out a dry laugh. "Sure you don't." The giggle returned. She took a dainty sip of her champagne, looking incredibly pleased with herself. This wasn't just about the seating arrangement. This was a power move. A statement. A reminder that I was less in their eyes. I could feel the heat of nearby gazes, subtle but present. People were watching. The wedding guests might have been occupied with drinks and music, but there were always eyes. Always whispers. And Janet? She lived for moments like this. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You really shouldn't take it personally." I turned my head slightly, locking eyes with her. "You mean I shouldn't take it personally that my wife and mother-in-law shoved me into a dark corner of the reception like some kind of unwanted plus one?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled. Janet shrugged, a slow, deliberate movement. We had to make space for family. Family. That word sat between us like an invisible knife. I felt a slow, simmering rage begin to take root in my chest. Family. The word they threw around like it meant something sacred. The word they used when it was convenient for them, when it made for good appearances, when it benefited their narrative. I had been married to Rose for 5 years. I had attended every tedious family event, smiled through every backhanded comment, tried my best to be what they wanted. And now, at the very event where I should have been standing beside my wife, I was being told I wasn't family. I clenched my fist at my side, swallowing down the sharp sting of betrayal. Rose, who still hadn't said a word, finally spoke. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. she said, her tone dismissive. It's just seating. Don't be dramatic. I turned to her, searching her face for something. Regret, guilt, anything that might indicate that she actually cared about how I was feeling. But there was nothing. No remorse. No hesitation. Just that same detached amusement. A slow realization began to creep over me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This wasn't an isolated event. This was who she was. Who she had always been. I just hadn't seen it clearly until now. A sharp clink of glass drew my attention, and I glanced over to see Janet raising her champagne flute slightly, watching me over the rim with a smirk that practically dripped with satisfaction. She had won. She had spent 5 years making sure I knew my place, and now, with one calculated move, she had solidified it. I was nothing to them. A convenient afterthought. An outsider. I exhaled slowly, a strange sense of calm washing over me. Fine. If that was how they wanted to play it, then so be it. But they were going to learn something about me tonight. I wasn't the type to stay quiet and accept disrespect. I wasn't the type to let people walk all over me. And I sure as hell wasn't going to sit at that lonely little table by the coat rack and pretend everything was fine. I glanced down at my hands, at the wedding gift I had carefully picked out. The one I had spent weeks choosing because I wanted it to be perfect. A thoughtful, meaningful gesture for a family that clearly didn't see me as one of their own. Why should I leave it for them? Why should I give anything to people who had spent years giving me nothing but contempt? I tightened my grip on the box, my mind already made up. I wasn't going to sit through this wedding, pretending that I was okay with being treated like this. I wasn't going to let Rose smirk her way through my humiliation. I was done. I turned to her, my voice calm but firm. Then I'm leaving. The smirk vanished from her lips instantly. Wait. But I was already moving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, unapologetically in control. I clenched my jaw, my gaze flickering to the grand ballroom, where laughter and music filled the air. Inside, people were clinking glasses, celebrating. But out here, I was discarded like an afterthought. For a long moment, I just stood there, gripping the wedding gift in my hands, feeling the weight of everything settle onto my chest. The betrayal, the humiliation, the quiet, insidious disrespect that had been brewing for years but had finally reached its boiling point. The truth was, I should have seen this coming. This wasn't just about the wedding. This wasn't an isolated event. It was a pattern, a carefully woven tapestry of dismissals, condescension, and casual cruelty. From the very beginning, I had been treated like an accessory to my wife's life, a necessary addition for social appearances, but never truly included, never valued. And I had accepted it. I had let it happen, because I had convinced myself that love was about compromise, that marriage meant overlooking the flaws, pushing through the difficult moments, proving myself worthy of their acceptance. But now, I saw the truth with crystal clarity. They never planned to accept me. I was never going to be good enough in their eyes. And maybe, just maybe, I had spent far too long trying to be. I glanced down at the wedding gift in my hands, the box carefully wrapped with a ribbon I had tied myself that morning. I had agonized over this gift, wanting it to be perfect. I had spent weeks searching, debating, wondering what would bring real joy to the newlyweds. It wasn't just an item. It was a symbol of effort, of thoughtfulness, of genuine care. And yet, the people this gift was meant for hadn't even thought twice about where I belonged tonight. They had made it very clear, I wasn't family. So why should I leave them a gift? A slow breath left my lips as the decision formed in my mind, solid and unwavering. I wasn't staying. I wasn't going to sit at some pathetic table by the coat rack while my wife and her family laughed at my expense. I wasn't going to plaster on a fake smile, pretend everything was fine, and allow them to keep treating me like I was disposable. I tightened my grip on the box, my pulse steady, calm. Then, without hesitation, I turned to Rose. Then I'm leaving. The smirk vanished from her lips instantly. Her posture stiffened, her fingers tightening around the stem of her champagne glass as she blinked at me, like she hadn't quite heard me right. What? I met her gaze, unwavering. I said I'm leaving. Her expression flickered, a quick flash of panic before she schooled it back into something more controlled. She let out a sharp breath, rolling her eyes. Oh, come on, Alex. You're being ridiculous. Ridiculous. I almost laughed. I wasn't the one who had deliberately placed my own husband outside the wedding reception like an unwanted guest. I wasn't the one who had smirked when my mother mocked me. I wasn't the one who had made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't a part of this family. And yet, I was the one being ridiculous. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, Rose. What's ridiculous is thinking I'd sit through this after what you just did. She scoffed, shifting her weight onto one foot, her expression slipping into something vaguely annoyed. It's just a table, Alex. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I repeated, letting the words settle between us. So if it's not a big deal, why did you go out of your way to make sure I wasn't sitting with you? She hesitated. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. The tiniest pause, the briefest flicker of discomfort. Because she knew. She knew. I didn't give her a chance to recover. You did this on purpose, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. You and your mother. Her expression twisted. Oh my God, Alex, not everything is some big conspiracy. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Then why are you smiling while I stand here humiliated? That did it. The smile vanished completely, her lips pressing into a thin, tight line. Look, she said, exhaling sharply, like she was losing patience. This is my sister's wedding. Not everything is about you. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. Then, I glanced down at the wedding gift still in my hands. Yeah, I murmured. Not everything is about me. With that, I turned, walking away from her. Wait. Where are you going? She called after me, the first hint of real urgency creeping into her tone. I didn't answer. I walked past the ballroom entrance, past the guests who were too caught up in their own conversations to notice the drama unfolding. I walked straight to the gift table, where a beautifully arranged pile of presents sat, wrapped in glossy paper and delicate bows. And then, with a calm, deliberate motion, I picked up my own gift and slid it right back into my jacket. Rose gasped. Alex, don't. I turned back to her, meeting her wide-eyed gaze. Why not? Her mouth opened, then closed. Because she knew she had no good answer. Why should I leave a gift for people who didn't even consider me family? Why should I continue giving to those who never gave me even the smallest ounce of respect? The answer was simple. I shouldn't. I looked at her one last time, taking in the sheer disbelief on her face, the way her hands twitched at her sides like she wanted to reach for me, to stop me, to fix this before it unraveled any further. But it was too late. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about every moment before this, every quiet dismissal, every time she had let her family treat me like an outsider while she stood by, saying nothing. And I was done pretending it didn't matter. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. And this time, she didn't stop me. A hush fell over the nearby guests. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, the cheerful hum of conversation, it all seemed to dim as I turned toward the exit, the wedding gift tucked under my arm. I felt the weight of their eyes on me. I knew how this looked. The husband of the bride's sister, standing at the edge of the ballroom with a stiff jaw and a storm brewing behind his eyes. A man who was supposed to be part of the family but was, for some reason, walking away with a gift he had brought. Rose grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. What are you doing? She hissed, panic flashing in her eyes. I pulled away. Oh, I don't know, Rose. Maybe because I just realized I don't belong here. Janet scoffed from a few feet away, where she had been watching everything unfold with a smirk. Don't be dramatic. I turned to her, letting my voice drop to an ice-cold calm. You just told me I don't count. So why should my gift? That did it. Nearby guests were now openly staring. Some whispering. Some pretending not to listen, but failing miserably. Even the waitstaff paused slightly as they passed, their eyes darting between me, Rose, and her mother. I felt a sharp satisfaction settle in my chest. Good. Let them see. Let them witness this moment. Let them know. Because I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Janet's smirk faltered, and for the first time that evening, she looked unsettled. Rose, on the other hand, was panicking. She knew I was serious. She knew that if I walked out now, the image of her perfect marriage would be shattered. Come on, she said through clenched teeth. You're embarrassing me. I let out a dry laugh. Embarrassing you? You made sure I was treated like an outsider at your sister's wedding. The tension in the air thickened. People were no longer just watching, they were waiting to see what would happen next. And I decided I wasn't done yet. I turned to Janet, tilting my head slightly. Funny how Rose has been talking about how exhausting you are. How she only puts up with you to avoid drama. Yet here you are, making more of it. Janet's smile vanished. The color drained from her face so fast, it was almost comical. Rose let out a sharp breath. Alex, stop. But I wasn't going to stop, because this had been brewing for years. And for the first time, I wasn't going to bite my tongue. I mean, come on. I continued, crossing my arms. What was it you said last week, Rose? I just have to tolerate Mom for a few more years until I can set boundaries. Silence. The ballroom had gone eerily quiet. Even the band had stopped playing. Janet turned sharply to Rose, her entire face twisted in disbelief. She had no way out. No way to spin this. No way to charm her way through it. For years, she had played the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect sister. And now, in one night, it was all crumbling. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Janet, meanwhile, looked furious, livid, like a woman who had just realized the daughter she had controlled for so long had secretly resented her. After everything I've done for you, Janet spat, taking a step forward. Rose flinched. Janet's voice rose, her hands flying up in exasperation. I paid for your wedding. I covered half your mortgage. I lied to your father when you got fired last year. And this is how you talk about me. A murmur spread through the crowd. Guests exchanged glances. Whispers broke out. Rose's father, Harold, had been standing at the bar up until this point, nursing a whiskey and keeping himself out of the drama. But now he set his glass down and pinched the bridge of his nose like a man with a massive migraine. Clearly, this wasn't the first time Janet had gone nuclear. Rose, now caught between the fury of her mother and the judgment of an entire room full of guests, looked utterly lost. The groom had been quiet until now. But suddenly, Daniel, the man Rose's sister had just married, stepped closer, looking at his new wife with wide, slightly horrified eyes. Wait, you talk about your mom like that? That was the final nail in the coffin. Rose was trapped. If she denied it, she'd be calling me a liar. But if she admitted it, she'd lose her mother's support. She had no escape. I watched as she opened and closed her mouth, struggling for words. I watched as the perfect, delicate threads of the family image she had tried so hard to maintain began to fray. And I realized something. For years, she had let her mother treat me like I was less, like I wasn't worthy of a seat at the table. But tonight, she was the one who didn't belong. And me? I had never felt so completely in control. I exhaled slowly, glancing down at the wedding gift still tucked under my arm. This was over. The marriage? The charade? The endless cycle of playing along while they continued to push me aside? Done. I took a step back, letting the moment fully sink in, letting Rose feel the weight of everything unraveling around her. And then, just loud enough for only her to hear, I murmured, I was never the outsider, Rose. You were just too blind to see it. Her breath hitched. Her eyes glistened, panic flashing across her face. And me? I turned, walking away. Because for the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't chasing after her. I wasn't trying to fix things. I was letting her drown in the wreckage she had created. And it felt damn good. Rose was panicking now. She knew me. She knew that if I walked out now, the image of her perfect marriage would be shattered. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of desperation, of realization. Up until this moment, she had been in control. She had orchestrated everything down to the finest detail, from the seating arrangement to the smug little comments that were meant to remind me of my place. But now, that control was slipping through her fingers like sand. Come on, she said through clenched teeth, forcing a smile for the onlookers. You're embarrassing me. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Embarrassing you? You made sure I was treated like an outsider at your sister's wedding. The words landed hard. I saw the slight flinch in her expression, the way her lips pressed together. She knew she couldn't deny it. I took a slow step back, still gripping the wedding gift, watching as her panic grew. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about how this looked. Janet, still fuming from the bombshell I had just dropped about Rose's true feelings toward her, crossed her arms. Don't be so dramatic, Alex, she snapped. You're making a scene. A scene. Oh, suddenly, they cared about a scene. I tilted my head slightly, letting my gaze flicker to the growing number of guests who were already watching. News traveled fast at events like this. People who hadn't even been near us 5 minutes ago were suddenly whispering, shifting, glancing over their shoulders to see what was happening. The music was still playing, the drinks were still flowing, but the energy in the room had shifted. There was tension now. A sense that something real was happening in a room full of forced smiles and rehearsed pleasantries. And Rose? She felt it too. I could tell by the way she reached for me, her fingers wrapping around my wrist. Not gently, not affectionately, but tightly. Desperately. Alex, she whispered, her voice lower now. We can talk about this later. Just let it go for now. Let it go? My jaw tightened. That was her go-to move. That had always been her go-to move. When her mother made a comment about my modest upbringing. When her father barely acknowledged me at family events. When she let her family treat me like a stranger in my own marriage. Just let it go, Alex. For 5 years, I had let it go. But not tonight. I pulled my wrist free from her grasp. No, Rose, I said, my voice steady. I think I've let it go long enough. Her eyes widened slightly, a split-second crack in her composure. She knew. She knew this was different. I wasn't just annoyed. I wasn't just upset. I was done. And that terrified her. Alex, she tried again, softer this time. Please. This isn't the time. I let out a breath, shaking my head. When would be the time, Rose? When we get home, so you can smooth things over. Pretend like this never happened. She didn't answer. Because we both knew that's exactly what she would have done. I turned to Janet, who was still watching with that smug, superior air about her, even though I could see the cracks forming beneath her carefully constructed facade. And then, before I could stop myself, I said, funny, isn't it? How Rose has spent years letting you treat me like I'm beneath her, all while complaining about you behind your back. Janet's expression darkened. Excuse me, she snapped, her voice sharp and clipped. I shrugged. Oh, don't act so surprised, Janet. You're not easy to deal with, and Rose has had plenty to say about you. Rose whirled on me, her voice low and seething. Alex, stop. But I wasn't stopping. Not anymore. I turned to Janet. In fact, last month, she told me she wished you'd stop interfering in our marriage. That she's just biding her time until she can finally set boundaries. Janet looked at Rose. The shift was instant. The fake warmth, the smug confidence, all of it vanished. Is that true? Janet demanded. Rose's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because there was no way out of this one. If she denied it, she'd be calling me a liar. If she admitted it, she'd lose her mother's support. And for someone like Rose, someone who had spent her entire life making sure she stayed on her mother's good side, that was devastating. I watched it happen in real time. Her carefully constructed world, her perfectly curated image, shattering. Guests were openly staring now. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, distant relatives. Everyone was watching as Rose floundered. And then, as if things couldn't get worse for her, the groom, Daniel, stepped forward. He looked at his new wife, Rose's sister, then back at Rose. His expression was unreadable, until he said, Wait, you talk about your mom like that. The tension in the room tripled. Because now, it wasn't just Rose's reputation that was at stake. It was her entire family dynamic. Janet was staring at her daughter like she was a stranger. The guests were eating this up, exchanging whispers and glances, watching every expression shift like it was the greatest reality show of the year. And me? I just stood there, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Power. Control. For years, they had treated me like I didn't matter, like I wasn't part of their world. And now, in one single night, they were all feeling what it was like to be on the outside, to be humiliated, to have their perfect little world collapse around them. Rose turned back to me, her eyes wide, pleading. Alex, she whispered. Please. I just smiled. Because for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't the one begging. Janet turned sharply to Rose, her expression twisted with pure fury. Her voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. After everything I've done for you? You ungrateful little brat. I had seen Janet angry before. Her cold disapproval when I first married Rose, her passive-aggressive digs at family dinners, the little ways she exerted control over everyone around her. But this was different. This was raw. Rose, for the first time in her life, looked truly afraid of her mother. Mom, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. But Janet was just getting started. She stepped forward, her perfectly manicured fingers tightening around the stem of her champagne glass, like she wanted to crush it in her grip. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. I paid for your wedding. I covered half your damn mortgage. I lied to your father when you got fired last year. And this is how you talk about me. The air in the ballroom grew thick with tension. A gasp rippled through the crowd. People were openly staring now. Even the servers, who had been busy clearing tables, had stopped what they were doing to watch the implosion of this perfect family. And Rose? Rose was drowning. Her carefully crafted image, perfect daughter, devoted wife, loving sister, was crumbling in front of everyone. "Mom, please." "No." Janet snapped, her face flushed red. "I have sacrificed so much for you. And you repay me by talking about me like I'm some kind of burden?" Rose's hands were trembling. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape, as if she could somehow undo the last 5 minutes. But she couldn't, and I just stood there, watching, because for once, it wasn't me in the hot seat. For once, I wasn't the one being humiliated. I had spent years biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, sitting through dinners where Janet and Rose made me feel like an outsider. And now, they were the ones feeling it. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Harold, Rose's father, was rubbing his temples like a man who deeply regretted his life choices. The groom, Daniel, looked absolutely stunned. His new wife, Rose's sister, was watching with wide eyes, her hands clenching at the fabric of her dress. And me? I was just enjoying the fireworks. Because this was better than I ever could have planned. Janet kept going, unable to stop herself. "And to think I was actually proud of you," she spat. "I stood up for you. I defended you. And all this time, you were waiting for the day you could set boundaries." Rose flinched at her own words being thrown back at her. She knew she had no way out of this. If she fought back, it would only get worse. If she apologized, it would mean admitting she had lied to her mother for years. She was trapped. And I was free. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt completely, utterly free. I took a slow sip from my drink, letting the moment sink in. Janet's rant was far from over. "I did everything for you," she shouted. "And this is how you treat me." Rose's face was a mix of shock and humiliation. And then, the real meltdown began. Janet pivoted. Her anger, once solely focused on Rose, suddenly included me again. "And you," she snapped, rounding on me. "You just had to stir things up, didn't you? Couldn't let things be? Couldn't just sit at your table and keep your mouth shut?" I raised an eyebrow, utterly unfazed. "Oh, I don't know, Janet," I said casually. "I guess I just didn't feel like being treated like garbage tonight." A sharp gasp came from someone in the crowd. Janet's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you've done," she seethed. "Do you think this little stunt makes you look good? It just proves you were never part of this family." I smirked. "Oh, trust me, Janet. I got the memo loud and clear." Rose was shaking her head now, tears welling in her eyes. "Alex, stop." But I wasn't stopping. I had been quiet for too long. I had been humiliated for too long. And tonight was my turn. I took a slow step closer, lowering my voice just enough so only Rose and Janet could hear. "You both spent years making me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like I wasn't part of your perfect little family." Janet scoffed, opening her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said, voice calm. "Because the truth is, you were never a real family. You were just a bunch of people pretending. And now, the truth is out for everyone to see." I gestured toward the crowd, toward the guests who had completely stopped pretending to mind their own business. Janet's face was red with rage. Rose was on the verge of tears. And me? I had never felt better. Janet's lip curled. "You are pathetic," she spat. I chuckled. "Says the woman whose daughter just got exposed in front of her entire family." Rose let out a soft gasp, like she couldn't believe I had just said that. But the truth hurt, didn't it? Janet took a step forward, pointing a sharp, accusing finger at me. "I should have never let Rose marry you." I grinned. Finally, something we agree on. That was it. That was the kill shot. Because at that moment, something shifted in Rose's expression. The tears in her eyes weren't just from embarrassment anymore. They were from fear. Because for the first time ever, I didn't look like the one fighting to hold this marriage together. I looked like the one ready to walk away. Janet's jaw clenched so hard I thought she might snap a tooth. "You are going to regret this," she hissed. I shrugged. "Doubt it." Then, before she could say another word, I turned away. And this time, Rose didn't try to stop me. Janet didn't have a comeback. The guests? They just watched. Because they knew. This family had just imploded, and there was no going back. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I had finally won. The ballroom was deathly silent. You could almost hear the weight of it all, the gasps that had already been sucked out of the room, the held breaths of guests who had witnessed everything unravel before their eyes. And then, a new voice cut through the thick air. Wait a minute. It was Daniel, the groom. The man who had, up until now, been nothing more than a quiet bystander in his own wedding. He had been standing near the head table, watching everything unfold with a look of growing horror. But now, he was fully stepping into the wreckage. He turned to his brand new wife, Rose's sister, his expression unreadable. You talk about your mom like that? The tension in the room shifted again, like a fresh wave of realization washing over the guests. Rose was already destroyed. But now, the spotlight had shifted. The bride, Rose's sister, looked stunned, like she had just been struck by lightning. Danny, wait, she started, but he wasn't looking at her. His focus was still on Rose, his mind racing. You could see it. All the little details coming together in his head. The lies. The manipulation. If Rose had been talking about her own mother like this, what else had she been saying? What else had been hidden beneath the surface? And suddenly, his entire wedding, his entire marriage, wasn't looking so perfect anymore. Rose, still standing there shell-shocked, finally snapped back into focus. Daniel, don't listen to him, she blurted, her voice bordering on hysteria now. He's just trying to cause a scene. I let out a quiet, amused chuckle. Oh no, Rose. You already did that all by yourself. Daniel took a slow, deliberate step forward, his expression shifting into something harder. Is that true? He asked. You said all that about your mom? Rose's lips parted, but no words came out, because how could she deny it? The moment stretched painfully long. The weight of her silence spoke louder than anything else. And in that single moment, Daniel realized the truth. His brand new wife was cut from the same cloth. The same lies. The same ability to smile to your face while tearing you apart behind your back. The same ruthlessness. His fingers twitched at his side, his breathing uneven. And suddenly, he was looking at his wife like he didn't even know her. How long have you been talking about my family behind my back? His wife froze. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her face going through 5 different emotions at once. Because she knew. She knew she had just lost everything. Rose, still desperately clinging to control, whipped toward me. Alex, stop ruining this wedding, she shrieked. But I just smirked. Me? Oh no, Rose. That was all you. The crowd was eating this up now. Guests were openly whispering. The bridesmaids were side-eyeing each other. Even Janet, who had just been in a fiery rage, was now too busy dealing with the aftermath of her own daughter's betrayal. But the one person who looked the most devastated? Daniel. Because it had finally sunk in. This wasn't just a bad night. This was the beginning of his marriage. And if this was how things started, how was it going to end? He turned toward me. You might have just saved me from the biggest mistake of my life. A hush fell over the ballroom. His words cut through the air like a blade, landing right at his wife's feet. She sucked in a sharp breath, her face draining of color. Because that wasn't something a husband said at his own wedding. I let out a slow, deep breath. Glad to be of service. And with that, I turned, ready to leave this disaster behind me. But just as I reached the exit, Daniel spoke again. Hey, Alex. I stopped, turned back slightly, one eyebrow raised. Take me with you. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Even Rose's sister, his brand new wife, jerked in shock. What? She choked. Daniel's expression was dead serious. Take me with you, he repeated, stepping forward. I think I just realized I married into a nightmare. A long, painful silence followed. And then, a voice rang out from the back of the room. Yeah, bro, run while you still can. A burst of nervous laughter erupted from the crowd. Even I couldn't hide my smirk. Because, for the first time all night, I wasn't the only man waking up to reality. And damn, did it feel good. Janet snapped. 1 second, the ballroom was filled with tense, stunned silence. The next, Janet's rage erupted like a volcano. After everything I have done for you, she screeched, rounding on Rose with a look of pure betrayal. Guests flinched at the sharpness of her voice. Conversations died instantly. Even the servers, who had been carefully pretending not to listen, froze in place. Rose looked mortified, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to hide. I have sacrificed so much for you, Janet raged, marching closer. I defended you. I covered your debts. And this is how you talk about me behind my back. The anger in her voice wasn't just about tonight. This was years of control, years of manipulation, years of Janet believing she had raised the perfect, obedient daughter, only to find out Rose had secretly resented her all along. Rose, for the first time in her life, looked completely powerless. "Mom," she started, her voice shaking. But Janet wasn't done. Not even close. "You lied to me," she hissed. "You lied. And after everything I did to make sure you had a good life?" A new tension spread through the crowd. Guests exchanged glances, their whispers growing. People shifted uncomfortably. Even Harold, Rose's father, the man who had spent most of the night looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, rubbed his temples, as if deeply regretting every choice that had led him to this moment. And Rose? Rose looked like she was going to be sick. "Mom, please stop." But Janet wasn't stopping. She couldn't, because this wasn't just anger anymore. This was desperation. Janet wasn't just lashing out. She was realizing, too late, that she had never truly controlled Rose the way she thought she had. And now, in front of everyone, she was losing her grip entirely. "I gave you everything," Janet screamed. "And you were just waiting for the day you could get away from me." Rose's face crumbled, because that was exactly what she had been doing. And now? Now everyone knew it. The bride, Rose's sister, was staring at her in horror, like she was seeing her sibling for the first time. And Daniel, the groom, looked like he had just been punched in the gut, because now he wasn't just seeing Rose for who she was. He was seeing his new wife in the same light. "How long have you been talking about MY family like that?" he asked his wife, his voice low, cold. The bride flinched, because she knew she had been caught, too. Rose's lips trembled, but no words came out, because there was nothing she could say to fix this. I stood there, watching it all fall apart, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt zero sympathy. This wasn't just karma. This was poetic justice. I watched as Rose struggled to find her footing. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her lips parted, then closed again, because she wasn't just dealing with Janet anymore. She was dealing with the entire weight of the truth crashing down on her. She had spent years letting her mother tear me down. She had spent years letting me be the outcast in my own marriage. And now? Now, she was the one who didn't belong. I turned slightly, ready to leave. But then, Janet's gaze snapped back to me. "And you?" she spat, her voice shaking with rage. I raised an eyebrow. "What about me, Janet?" I said, my voice calm. Her eyes blazed with fury. "This is your fault," she shrieked. "You ruined my family." A sharp gasp echoed through the room. Because now, Janet had fully lost it. Her true nature, the control, the manipulation, the anger, was on full display. And the guests? They were watching every second of it unfold. I let out a slow breath. "No, Janet," I said simply. "Your family ruined itself." Her face twisted. "You think you're better than us?" she hissed. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "I just know when to walk away from a sinking ship." A sharp silence followed. Because that was it. That was the final blow. Janet stood there, shaking, her fists clenched. Rose was on the verge of breaking down. Daniel was looking at his new wife like he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The entire ballroom was tense, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. And me? I took a slow step back, my heart calm for the first time in years. "Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone," I said, my voice light, easy. Then, gripping my wedding gift tightly, I turned and walked straight out the door, because I wasn't part of this mess anymore. I never really had been. And now, they could all deal with the disaster they had created. Without me. The night air hit me like a breath of fresh sanity as I stepped outside the ballroom. The weight of it all, the noise, the humiliation, the endless cycle of being treated like I didn't belong, was gone the moment I walked through that door. But inside, chaos was still unraveling. I didn't even need to turn around to know that Janet was still fuming, that Rose was desperately trying to salvage what was left of her image, and that Daniel, the groom, was probably rethinking his entire marriage. And me? For the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. I should have kept walking. Should have left it all behind. Let them deal with the wreckage they had created. But then, the ballroom doors burst open behind me. "Alex," her voice. Tight. Desperate. I didn't turn around immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, let her feel it, that unfamiliar feeling of being the one left behind. Finally, I glanced over my shoulder. Rose stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her dress slightly rumpled from the tension of the night. Her eyes were wild, her expression torn between anger and panic. I raised an eyebrow. "You're still my husband," she said, her voice pleading now. "You're supposed to support me." I let out a slow, quiet chuckle. Not the kind that comes from amusement. The kind that comes from finally seeing everything clearly. I turned fully to face her, taking in the sight of the woman who had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough. Now standing in front of me, realizing she was the one who had lost everything. "Oh," I said, my voice steady. I thought I didn't count. The words landed like a bullet. Her entire face crumpled. Because she knew. She knew what she had done. She had spent years, making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. She had let her mother degrade me, push me aside, treat me like I was less. And now, she was the one begging for me to stay. The irony was almost poetic. "Alex," she tried again, softer this time, reaching for me. "Please, can we just talk?" I stepped back before she could touch me. "Talk," I echoed. Her lips parted slightly, but she had nothing to say. Because there was nothing left to say, I shook my head. "No, Rose. We should have talked a long time ago." A flash of guilt crossed her face. And then, a new emotion crept in. Desperation turned to anger. Because she wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to not having control. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice sharper now. "You think this makes you look good?" Walking away, I just smiled. "No," I said, "but it makes me feel good." Her face twisted. Because that was something she couldn't argue with. For years, I had been the one chasing, the one compromising, the one trying to belong. But not anymore. And she was the one being left behind. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last remnants of my patience slip away. You don't get to treat me like I'm nothing for years and then act shocked when I finally decide I've had enough. She flinched. Because the truth hurt. "I was always on your side, Rose," I continued, voice calm but firm. "Even when your mother treated me like garbage. Even when you let her. Even when I felt like I was just there. I still chose you." Her eyes shone with something unspoken. Because she knew. She knew I had been patient. Had been loyal. Had tried. And she had thrown it all away. "Alex," I shook my head. "No, Rose." She fell silent. For the first time, I wasn't the one fighting for this marriage. "I hope this was worth it," I said finally. "All of it. The disrespect. The games. The need to put me in my place." Her breath hitched. "Because now, you get to see what it's like when I stop trying." I watched the realization hit her fully. The panic that replaced the arrogance. The fear that replaced the smugness. She had never thought this day would come. She had never thought I would leave. But now, she was watching me walk away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I took a slow step back. Then another. Her lips parted. She wanted to say something. Anything. But it was too late. I gave her one last look. Then I turned. And for the first time in years, I walked away without looking back. The next morning, my phone blew up. I knew it was coming. I expected it. But still, seeing Rose's name flood my screen, over and over, was almost pathetic. I didn't answer. I didn't even bother to read most of them. But the ones I did, they were exactly what I thought they'd be. "I can't believe you did that. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You're my husband, Alex. You're supposed to stand by me. Apologize, and maybe we can fix this." I let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Apologize? For what? For finally standing up for myself? For not sitting quietly while her family made a joke out of me? For walking away when I was done being treated like garbage? Yeah, not happening. I scrolled past her messages, deleting them without responding. Then I saw the voicemails from Janet. 7 of them. All different shades of furious. I played one out of pure curiosity. "Alex, you need to fix this. You humiliated Rose. You embarrassed our family. You should be ashamed of yourself. Call me back, now." I smirked and deleted it immediately. There wasn't a single part of me that felt bad. Not one. Because for once in my life, I had done what was right for me. And I wasn't looking back. But the best message? The one that actually made me pause. A text. From Daniel. The groom. The man who had watched his brand new marriage implode right alongside mine. "You might have just saved me from the biggest mistake of my life." I stared at the words for a long moment, then let out a slow exhale. because I knew exactly what he meant. I wasn't the only one who had seen the truth last night. I wasn't the only one who had been playing a losing game. Daniel had looked at his new wife and seen his future flash before his eyes. A lifetime of feeling small. A lifetime of walking on eggshells. A lifetime of trying to be enough for someone who would never see him as an equal. And now? Now he was rethinking everything. I tossed my phone onto the kitchen counter, leaning back in my chair. For the first time in 5 years, my entire world had shifted. And yet, I felt lighter. Like I had finally put down the weight I had been carrying for so long. The weight of trying. The weight of being married to someone who had never truly valued me. Rose could call. Janet could scream. The entire family could be furious. I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. And it felt damn good.